heard a lot about how risky this space is, and a lot of what we focused on today was how to de-risk that clinical development, whether it's through patient selection, clinical models such as the CAE model. I guess what you've heard today, does that help, those kind of elements, do those help de-risk the opportunity for you? And how have what you heard today kind of impact how you're thinking about dry eye? Emmett, you want to start?
I don't feel very de-risked, frankly. I guess what I would say, though, is we have one target, one mechanism that's relatively validated, and that's inflammation. I think the main one of the problems, among others, with dry eye is that inflammation is only part of the problem. I don't know if it's 10% or 50% or 30%, but it's only part of the problem. Cyclosporin seems to work, but not super well. It takes 6 months to work and it stings, and it's a $500 million drug. And we know patients don't like topical drops. They're 50% compliant, and it's a $500 million drug. So it's working for those patients. It's helping those patients, so there's a huge unmet need. I don't think cyclosporin's a great drug. I'm a uveitis specialist, and I treat patients with immunosuppressives. Historically, cyclosporin was popularized to treat ocular inflammatory disease mostly at the National Eye Institute, and I think it was to a large extent there that it was put into topical agents and then promulgated to be used as a topical, among other places, but there to be used to treat topical ocular disease. And I just think there are better anti-inflammatories in the pipeline. I think LFA inhibition is one. Pfizer's looking at JAK inhibition. And there are others in the pipeline that I think are going to be better anti-inflammatories. And we have the potential to see more efficacy with that target. So that's where I think we'll see the greatest near-term gain. I'm not sure what the next new thing is going to be in dry eye. I don't see a target on the horizon. Maybe IL-1. I've heard Reza Dana talk about IL-1 inhibition. I know he's excited about that. But beyond that, beyond inflammation, I'm not sure where the next new thing is. I don't know if you guys, maybe it's TRAC. I don't know.
I think the way when we think about how to de-risk an investment, we usually think about it financially. So we realize that drug development is inherently an extraordinarily risky business, and that's the business we're in, so we accept that risk. But one of the things we try to do, for instance, is tranching an investment such that you put a certain amount of money in the upfront, and you save a pretty decent amount of reserve in the back end, so that after they reach certain clinical milestones, you put additional capital in. And that way you don't have all your capital exposed to the investment at once. But I think having adequate reserves, which is something we kind of touched on a minute ago, is so important in our business, in biotechnology. I mean, we fund money-losing businesses for a long, long time. These are voracious capital appetite businesses. And without the IPO market and the public markets able to provide additional capital for us, we have to keep reserves. We have to keep syndicates relatively large because we need to make sure that we have enough capital to take it through critical points so that pharma doesn't come along and pick it out of our pocket for cents on the dollar because we weren't able to get there and stay there in order to push it to its valuation inflection points. But in terms of risk, to me, it just doesn't sound, unlike other diseases, doesn't sound like with dry eye, you're out of the woods until you get an approval. And that's just the way it is, and so you have to calculate your risk-based returns on that.
Cedric?
Yeah, I think there's two things that potentially the industry or the researchers could do to reduce the risk, and we've heard some of that today. The first one would be great animal models. I mean, let's face it, we don't really have great predictive models of dry eye. There's a few. We actually know them, but if we had a couple of animal models that we could use to test the drugs before we go into humans, that would be extremely helpful. In other therapeutic areas, when we invest, there is some models are predictors of what happens in humans, and it makes the investment easier. It makes the perceived risk to go lower. So that's an area where more research, more work is probably required. The other big thing that I think probably needs to be done is some kind of a mix of symptoms and signs, a questionnaire, a validated questionnaire, like there is for arthritis, the WOMAC, or for depression, the Hamilton score, that could be used in clinical development, something validated. It doesn't exist today, so therefore we are back to one sign and one symptom, which is which we understand perfectly. But if there were some kind of a questionnaire like that, it would actually be very useful for us, because then we could hopefully, if we get a certain result after a phase 2 trial, then assuming the same questionnaire is used in phase 3, it's just a larger N, and therefore your positive predictive value of your phase 2 goes higher. Therefore, you're more likely to create value earlier in the process. These don't exist, but I think these are areas where more research would clearly be required.
Great, thanks.